Hi guys, Harry and Hugo here for another progression podcast, and today we're talking to you guys about training intensity. So we're going to discuss this idea of perfection that has been built when it comes to training intensity. We're going to talk about how you perhaps are starting if you're new in the gym, some of the mistakes you're going to want to avoid in terms of training intensity, and then we're going to talk about how you can progress from being a beginner towards that level of an expert trainee, and therefore cover the intermediate aspect as well. So first of all, when we're talking about this idea of training perfection, it's the no pain, no gain intensity and mindset that is portrayed all over the fitness industry. And this has come around from examples like Ronnie Coleman, Arnold, these top bodybuilders, where we all have a tendency to look at the guys who are at the highest level and feel that if we copy what they do, then we too will be at a high level. But the situation is that simply copying somebody who has already put in years and years of work isn't going to get you to that point. You need to copy what they did at the very, very start. Which brings us nicely onto the topic of if you're a beginner. So Hugo, if somebody is very new to training, perhaps only been training a few months or they haven't started training yet, what are some of the mistakes that they're going to want to avoid, and what are they going to want to do to try and get their training intensity at an appropriate level?
So I'd say is a good phrase is don't run before you can walk. I think if you're a beginner, this is really key. When you're going into the gym, maybe you want to focus on building a good foundation. So you want to use maybe the machines instead of free weights. You want to pick weights that are manageable. You don't want to pick weights that you can't lift. Like, you don't want to go in and test your 1 rep max straight away. So picking reasonable weights, get yourself into learning the movements of each exercise. I'd also say is you don't want to go in to the gym and train like an animal and absolutely ruin yourself so you can't walk for 5 days. The key with a beginner is also frequency. So you want to be able to get back into the gym the next day, 2 days after, so you can continue build those habits to keep getting back into the gym.
Yeah, and we say it's a bit like learning a new sport, or maybe even learning a new instrument. You know, if you played once for 3 hours on a guitar and you cut your fingers up and they're sore, and you can't play for another week, well, you're not learning and you're not getting any better. So in a week's time, you're only going to be as good as you were at the end of that last session. Whereas if you learn something new, half an hour every day, you build that resistance to the guitar strings, or in a training setting, your body gets used to the training without being completely broken.
Yeah.
So you can get back in.
We've seen it time and time again.
Oh,
it's always the case.
It's always quite funny, but
Yeah.
it's not doing anybody any favours.
No.
So in terms of how we can progress from that position where we're trying not to overdo it, we're at the very basics, we're trying to learn fundamental movements towards this level of being a higher level in terms of your training experience. It's simply a case of progressive overload, which is gradually increasing the stimulus. If I put my teeth back in. Gradually increasing the stimulus and the stress that you expose to the body or your muscles over time, so that you see an increased adaptation. So for example, you know, if we were starting off and we went and used a chest press, you know, we could look at a push-up as well as a fundamental pressing exercise. Then perhaps you get good at those press-ups, you can increase your reps. On the chest press, you can increase the weight, you can increase the amount of sets you do, you can increase the time and attention that you use, and gradually build these different stresses, and then perhaps try a more advanced exercise like a dumbbell press, a bench press, and practice the form in simpler exercises before you advance into these more difficult ones. And it's key to mention that over time, the amount of stress required to see adaptation does increase. So when we look at guys who have been training for 10, 20 years, or ladies who have been training for 10, 20 years, what they have to do to see adaptation is far more than somebody who's just started. Enjoy the beginner gains. The goal is to get as much back in terms of results with as minimal effort expended. There's no need to kill ourselves.
No.
Which sums it up nicely. You know a great illustration of this, don't you?
Our uncle, he told us this illustration, which I think is great. So he says, like, getting the muscles to work, it's like flicking on a light switch. So all you have to do is put enough pressure to flick that switch and the lights will turn on. But if you just kept pushing as hard as you can on that light switch, it's not going to make the lights brighter. So that's like the gym. So all that you need to do is just train to the point where that switch has flicked, and then the lights will turn on and that will work.
Absolutely. Don't be that guy or that girl who just presses the switch as hard as possible and can't walk down the stairs the next day. But there you go, training intensity. Those are some ways that you can progress and improve your intensity and see better results.